The grand algorithm had never been wrong in 50,000 years. Supreme Calculator Veth Noir stood before the massive crystalline display that dominated the center of the Caraxian High Command. Numbers flowed across its surface like rivers of light, each calculation building upon the last, creating patterns of absolute certainty. The algorithm was more than a computer, it was the foundation of Caraxian civilization, the mathematical engine that had guided their empire through millennia of expansion across the galaxy. Veth Noir's 3 eyes tracked the streams of data with practiced ease. His elongated fingers, each tipped with a neural interface node, moved through the holographic projections, pulling details forward for closer examination. Around him, lesser calculators worked in silence, their minds linked to the algorithm through quantum entanglement, becoming part of the vast computational matrix that predicted the future with terrifying accuracy. The Caraxian collective had built their empire on one fundamental principle: the universe was deterministic. Every action could be predicted, every outcome calculated, every variable accounted for. They had conquered 127 species across 43 star systems, and every single invasion had proceeded exactly as the algorithm predicted. Not approximately. Not mostly. Exactly. Some species surrendered when they saw the mathematical inevitability of their defeat. Others fought with desperate courage, only to lose precisely as many ships, warriors, and cities as the algorithm had foretold. A few tried to negotiate, offering tributes and alliances, but even their offers came at the exact moment the predictions indicated they would. The universe, the Caraxians believed, was simply a vast equation waiting to be solved. And now the algorithm had found a new variable to resolve: a small blue planet on the outer edge of the Orion Arm, third from a yellow star the inhabitants called Sol. Supreme Calculator, spoke adjunct mathematician Krell 9, approaching with the cautious deference required in Veth Noir's presence. The final analysis of the target world is complete. The data confirms all preliminary projections. Veth Noir gestured, and a three-dimensional representation of Earth materialized before him. The planet rotated slowly, its oceans gleaming, white clouds swirling across continents. Data streamed alongside the image: atmospheric composition, gravitational constant, population distribution, technological development level, military capabilities, sociological patterns, historical conflict data. Summarize, Veth Noir commanded, though he had already absorbed the raw data directly through his neural link. Species designation: human. Population: 7.9 billion. Technological classification: level 2.3 on the Kardashev adaptation scale. They have achieved orbital capability and primitive nuclear technology. Their computational systems are based on binary silicon processors. Laughably crude. No faster-than-light capability. No energy weapons beyond experimental lasers. No understanding of quantum entanglement or dimensional folding. Krell 9 paused, his mandibles clicking with what passed for amusement among Caraxians. They still use chemical propulsion for most of their spacecraft. They burn refined hydrocarbons and controlled explosions. It is almost endearing. Veth Noir studied the data more closely. Humanity had split themselves into nearly 200 separate political entities, constantly bickering over resources and ideological differences. Their history was a tapestry of warfare, tens of thousands of documented conflicts over their brief existence. They had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons within decades of discovering atomic fission. They poisoned their own atmosphere, depleted their own resources, and seemed constitutionally incapable of long-term cooperation. Psychological profile? Veth Noir asked. Highly aggressive. Territorial. Prone to irrational decision-making based on emotion rather than logic. They form strong tribal attachments that override rational self-interest. However, they also demonstrate remarkable adaptability and creativity within their technological limitations. The algorithm notes this as a minor wildcard variable, but well within acceptable parameters. Military assessment? Primitive but numerous. Approximately 20 million active military personnel across all political divisions. Their weapons would be ineffective against our shielding technology. Their largest explosive devices are fusion-based. We tested similar weapons 47,000 years ago and discarded them as obsolete. Naval projection. They possess approximately 15,000 aircraft capable of limited orbital defense. None could penetrate our hulls. Veth Noir pulled up the algorithm's final calculation. The crystalline display pulsed with golden light as the answer materialized. 99.97% probability of successful conquest with minimal resistance. Recommended force allocation: 300 vessels. Estimated Caraxian casualties. 0 to 15 individuals, accounting for mechanical failures or statistical anomalies. Estimated time to complete subjugation. 47 hours. It was almost insulting how easy it would be. Their industrial capacity could be useful, Krell 9 continued. Humans are highly productive when properly directed. They have already demonstrated the ability to rapidly manufacture complex goods on a massive scale. Under Caraxian management, their worlds could produce valuable resources. The algorithm suggests they would make adequate servitor populations. And their compliance? The psychological models indicate they will resist initially, as most species do. However, once they understand the mathematical certainty of their defeat, 94.6% will accept integration into the collective. The remainder can be managed through standard pacification protocols. Veth Noir had heard similar assessments 127 times before. He should have felt nothing. Caraxians had long ago evolved beyond emotional responses to conquest. It was simply resource allocation, the universe organizing itself into more efficient patterns. Yet somewhere in his ancient mind, a flicker of something like anticipation stirred. There is one anomaly worth noting, Krell 9 added, his tone shifting slightly. For the past 32 Earth years, we have detected unusual electromagnetic signatures from their planet. Brief pulses, highly focused, directed into deep space. The pattern is irregular. We cannot determine if they are deliberate communications or simply electromagnetic noise from their primitive technology. The algorithm's assessment? 99.2% probability of being random noise or atmospheric interference. Less than 1% chance of being deliberate signals. And even if they are trying to communicate with potential allies, no other spacefaring species exists within 300 light-years of their location. They are isolated. Veth Noir dismissed the concern with a wave. The algorithm had accounted for every variable. It always did. Prepare the fleet, he commanded. 300 vessels. Standard conquest configuration. We depart in one solar cycle. As Krell 9 moved to implement the orders, another calculator approached, an elder named Threshcoal whose neural nodes had turned silver with age. Threshcoal had witnessed 40 conquests personally and had lived through the data of dozens more. Supreme Calculator, Threshcoal said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. I request permission to voice concern. Veth Noir's eyes fixed on the elder. Concerns were rare among Caraxians. The algorithm eliminated uncertainty, and without uncertainty, there was nothing to concern oneself about. Speak. I have reviewed the human data extensively. Their history troubles me in ways I cannot fully articulate through mathematical expression. They are chaotic, unpredictable. They have survived multiple extinction-level events through sheer adaptability. They wage war with a ferocity that seems divorced from rational calculation. The algorithm accounts for this, yes, but I wonder if we truly understand what we are engaging. The algorithm calculates their unpredictability as a factor, Veth Noir replied. It is already incorporated into the projection. Their chaos is merely another variable, Threshcoal. Mathematics encompasses all things, even randomness. Perhaps, the elder said slowly, but in 50,000 years, we have never encountered a species quite like this. They have created art and music and literature that serves no evolutionary purpose. They form emotional bonds so strong they will die for individuals outside their genetic line. They believe in concepts, freedom, justice, love, that have no mathematical definition. How does the algorithm account for belief? Veth Noir felt a pulse of irritation, an emotion he thought he had long ago suppressed. The algorithm accounts for everything. It must, because mathematics is the language of the universe itself. If humans believe in abstractions, those beliefs will still lead to predictable behaviors. Everything reduces to equations in the end. As you say, Supreme Calculator. Threshcoal bowed his head, but doubt lingered in his posture. The conversation was forgotten as Veth Noir turned his attention to fleet preparation. 300 ships began emerging from their dimensional storage bays across the Caraxian home system. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering. Sleek hulls composed of metamaterials that could shift density on command, energy shields capable of deflecting stellar radiation, plasma cannons that could vaporize mountains, and faster-than-light drives that folded space like paper. The Caraxians had not lost a military engagement in recorded history. They did not charge into battle with battle cries or patriotic fervor. They simply calculated the optimal strategy, implemented it with mechanical precision, and watched as reality conformed to their predictions. War, for them, was merely applied mathematics. 27 hours later, the fleet assembled in formation. Veth stood on the command deck of the flagship, surrounded by streams of data. Every system showed optimal performance. Every calculation confirmed the predicted outcome. 300 ships would arrive at Earth, deliver an ultimatum, and when the humans inevitably responded with their primitive military forces, the Caraxians would disable them with minimal effort. Resistance would collapse within 2 solar cycles. Integration into the collective would begin immediately after. Initiate dimensional fold, Veth commanded. Space rippled. The fabric of reality bent according to precise mathematical formulas, creating a bridge across light years. The fleet slipped through the fold, traveling distances that would take light itself thousands of years to cross. They emerged at the edge of Earth's solar system, their sensors immediately cataloging everything. 8 planets, hundreds of moons, millions of asteroids, all exactly where the algorithm predicted they would be. Radio transmissions from Earth confirmed the humans had detected their arrival. Panic spread across their communication networks in predictable waves. The fleet moved inward, engines leaving barely a ripple in space-time. Earth grew larger in the view screens, a jewel of blue and green against the black void. Caraxian sensors penetrated the planet's defenses easily, mapping every military installation, every population center, every potential threat. There were no threats. Just a species that had barely crawled out of its gravity well, now facing an empire that had mastered the cosmos 50 millennia ago. Broadcast the ultimatum on all frequencies, Veth ordered. The message went out in every human language simultaneously, translated by algorithms that had decoded thousands of alien tongues. People of Earth, you have been calculated. Your civilization has been measured, your capabilities assessed, your future determined. The Caraxian Collective offers you one choice. Submit to integration and accept your place in the ordered galaxy, or resist and face the certainty of extinction. You have 1 solar hour to respond. The algorithm has already predicted your answer. Choose wisely, though your choice has already been accounted for. Veth watched the human communication networks explode with activity. Government channels lit up. Military installations went to high alert. Citizens flooded their primitive internet with fear and speculation. It was all so perfectly predictable. The Caraxians waited. The algorithm had calculated that 17 governments would attempt to negotiate, 34 would prepare for military resistance, and the remainder would collapse into chaos. All of these responses were already factored into the conquest timeline. But as the minutes ticked by, something unexpected happened. Earth went silent. Every transmission stopped. Every radio signal ceased. Every communication satellite went dark. The planet that had been screaming with electromagnetic noise suddenly became a void of silence. Veth felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Confusion. Report, he demanded. Unknown, Supreme Calculator, Krell-9 responded, his fingers flying across holographic controls. All human communications have ceased simultaneously. The probability of this occurring naturally is. I know the probability, Veth snapped. What are they doing? The Caraxian sensors swept the planet again and again, but they could detect only the absence of signals. No electromagnetic activity. No infrared signatures of military movement. No signs of panic or preparation. Just silence. 47 seconds of absolute silence. And then the Earth attacked. The first indication that something was catastrophically wrong came when Veth flagship shuddered. Caraxian vessels did not shudder. Their inertial dampening systems were flawless, their shields impenetrable, their hulls composed of materials that could withstand the heart of a star. Yet the command deck rippled with force, throwing calculators from their stations, sending streams of data spiraling into chaos. Report. Veth shouted, gripping his command pedestal as another impact struck the ship. Incoming projectiles, velocity impossible, mass signatures reading, Supreme Calculator, they're hitting us with solid matter at relativistic speeds. The view screen exploded with light. Across the Caraxian formation, ships began to die. Not the elegant deaths of naval warfare with exchanged fire and tactical maneuvering, but sudden, absolute annihilation. Kinetic projectiles, simple chunks of tungsten and titanium, were striking the fleet at 90% the speed of light. At those velocities, mass became energy. Physics became a weapon. Each impact released the explosive force of multiple nuclear warheads. The Caraxian shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma bolts, were utterly useless against solid matter moving at near light speeds. The projectiles punched through the defensive fields as if they didn't exist, tearing through metamaterial hulls, vaporizing entire sections of ships, turning sophisticated vessels into expanding clouds of superheated debris. Source. Find the source. Vethnor screamed, his composure shattering like glass. Multiple launch points, Earth's moon, hidden installations, how did we not detect them? The algorithm. The algorithm was failing. For the first time in 50,000 years, reality was deviating from prediction. The crystalline display that had shown 99.97% certainty of victory now flickered with error messages, unable to process what was happening. Krell 9 worked frantically at his station. Supreme Calculator, I'm detecting electromagnetic pulses emanating from Earth's surface. Thousands of them, they're targeting our communication systems. As if to confirm his words, the quantum entanglement links between Caraxian vessels began to fail. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves isolated, their AI systems crashing, their targeting computers frozen. The humans had somehow generated an electromagnetic interference pattern that exploited vulnerabilities in Caraxian technology that shouldn't have existed. Because the Caraxians had never needed to defend against such primitive attacks. Energy shields stopped energy. Who would waste time defending against simple electromagnetic pulses when plasma cannons and dimensional torpedoes were the standard weapons of galactic warfare? Humans would. Humans who had studied every probe the Caraxians had sent for 30 years. Humans who had appeared primitive while secretly analyzing every scrap of alien technology they could detect. Humans who had deliberately maintained their crude appearance while building weapons their enemy would never anticipate. Another salvo of kinetic projectiles tore through the fleet. Vethnor watched in horror as the dreadnought Certainty of Mathematics, a vessel that had participated in 40 conquests, was struck by 3 tungsten rods simultaneously. The ship split in half, its reactor containment failing, adding a miniature sun to the carnage as fusion cores breached. Shields are ineffective. Recommend immediate withdrawal, someone shouted. Deploy countermeasures. Return fire. Destroy those lunar installations. Vethnor commanded, but his orders were drowned in chaos. The Caraxian ships tried to respond, their plasma cannons charging, their targeting systems locking onto the human launch sites. But before they could fire, space around them erupted with exotic energy signatures. Mines? They've seeded our approach vector with mines. Not just any mines. These were quantum entanglement devices, linked in pairs, creating localized spatial distortions. When a Caraxian ship passed through their trigger threshold, the paired mines would swap positions instantaneously, generating a shockwave of twisted spacetime that tore at the very fabric of reality. Ships caught in these distortions were crushed by gravitational shear forces, their hulls crumpling like paper in a fist. Vethnor stared at the carnage in disbelief. Quantum entanglement weapons? Humans weren't supposed to understand quantum mechanics at this level, they were level 2.3 on the technological scale. Such weapons required understanding that took most species millennia to develop. Unless they had been developing it. Unless they had seen the Caraxian probes decades ago and had made a choice. Appear weak, study the enemy, and prepare an ambush that would exploit every assumption their attackers would make. Supreme Calculator, detecting massive energy signatures rising from Earth's surface. The planet that had gone silent 47 seconds ago suddenly came alive. Across every continent, concealed launch silos opened. But what emerged were not the primitive chemical rockets the Caraxians had catalogued. These were sleek vessels with drives that bent space, with hulls that incorporated stolen and reverse-engineered alien technology, with weapons that no level 2.3 civilization should possess. 30 years. Humanity had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. Dr. Sarah Chin watched from the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado Rockies. Around her, dozens of officers coordinated humanity's counterattack with precision that would have impressed even the Caraxians. On the main screen the alien fleet was dying. Kinetic bombardment effectiveness. 94% of targets neutralized, reported Colonel Martinez. EMP weapons have disabled communications across their remaining forces. Quantum mines have claimed an additional 47 vessels. General Marcus Webb stood beside Sarah, his weathered face illuminated by tactical displays. The Reaper Squadron is launching now. We're not giving them time to regroup. Sarah nodded, though her heart was racing. 30 years ago, she had been a graduate student when humanity detected the first Caraxian probe. Most governments wanted to announce first contact, to celebrate, to reach out in friendship. But a very few, had looked at the probe's stealth capabilities and sophisticated sensors and had drawn a darker conclusion. Someone was watching. Someone was studying. Someone was preparing. And so Project Damocles was born. In absolute secrecy, the brightest minds from every nation had pooled their knowledge. They had analyzed every nanosecond of data from the alien probes. They had built hidden installations on the Moon and Mars. They had developed weapons based on principles the aliens would never expect, because those weapons were considered too primitive, too crude, too unsophisticated for real warfare. The Caraxians had fought with energy and plasma and exotic matter. They had never considered that a simple rock accelerated to relativistic speeds could become the ultimate weapon. They had never imagined that primitive electromagnetic pulses could disrupt their quantum-entangled communication networks because they had never needed to shield against such attacks. The aliens had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity's technological level defined humanity's understanding. They had never considered that humans might study, adapt, and innovate beyond their current capabilities. They had never factored in human deception. On the view screen, the last major Caraxian vessel, the flagship, was attempting to retreat, its dimensional fold drive charging. Sarah could see the desperation in its erratic movements. "Don't let them escape," she said quietly. "If even one ship reports back, they'll return with a real fleet." "Reaper Squadron is in pursuit," Webb confirmed. The human ships that emerged from Earth were not beautiful. They were angular and brutal, bristling with weapons, their hulls covered in reactive armor and countermeasure pods. They had been built for one purpose: to kill anything that threatened humanity's home. The squadron overtook the fleeing Caraxian flagship within minutes. They didn't destroy it, not yet. Instead, they disabled its engines with precisely targeted railgun fire, leaving it drifting in space. Aboard the flagship, Vethnor stood among the ruins of his command deck. Half his crew was dead. The algorithm's crystalline display had shattered, its predictions proven worthless. Around him, the survivors stared in shock at the beings they had dismissed as primitive. "Incoming transmission," a calculator reported in a broken voice. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human woman's face. She was old by human standards, perhaps 60 years, with gray hair pulled back and eyes that carried the weight of terrible decisions. "I am Dr. Sarah Chin," the woman said calmly. 32 years ago we detected your probes studying our world. You thought we were too primitive to notice, too stupid to understand what it meant. You were wrong." Vethnor said nothing, his three eyes fixed on this human who had destroyed his fleet. "We knew you were coming," Sarah continued. "We knew you saw us as inferior. So we made a choice, we let you keep thinking that. We maintained our primitive appearance while we studied you, learned from you, and prepared for you. Every probe you sent gave us more information. Every scan you made showed us your blind spots. You relied on your algorithm, your mathematical certainty. We relied on something you could never calculate: the human capacity for deception, innovation, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender." She leaned forward. "Your fleet is destroyed. 300 ships reduced to debris in 8 minutes. But we're not done. We're tracking your fold space signatures back to your home systems. And we're coming." You cannot," Vethnor whispered. "We are the Caraxian Collective. We have ruled for 50,000 years. You are nothing, primitives." "We were primitives," Sarah interrupted. 32 years ago. But we learned fast. And now we're going to teach you something your algorithm never predicted. Never underestimate humanity. Never assume our current state defines our potential. And most importantly, never, ever threaten our home." She made a gesture and the transmission ended. 12 hours later, the human fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of Caraxian territory. They didn't come to conquer. Humanity had learned that lesson from history. They came to send a message. The demonstration was brutal and precise. 3 uninhabited Caraxian outpost stations were destroyed in minutes, showcasing humanity's new weapons capabilities. Then the fleet broadcast a simple message across all Caraxian frequencies. "We know where you live. We know your technology. We know your weaknesses. You tried to conquer us. You failed. Now you have 2 choices. Leave humanity alone forever, or we will return. Not with 300 ships. With 3,000. And we won't stop until your algorithm calculates the certainty of your extinction." The Caraxian Collective, for the first time in its 50,000-year history, chose surrender. The treaty was signed on neutral ground 3 months later. The Caraxians would withdraw from human space. They would share certain technologies. They would never approach Earth again. In return, humanity would not pursue their destruction. Other species across the galaxy, species that had themselves been conquered or threatened by the Caraxians, watched these events with a mixture of awe and terror. A primitive species had defeated the galaxy's greatest military power in less than a day. The message was clear: humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had arrived with fire and fury. Sarah Chin stood in the observation deck of the newly christened Earth Defense Station, looking out at the stars. General Webb joined her, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. "To survival," he said, raising his glass. "To adaptation," Sarah replied, clinking her glass against his. They drank in silence for a moment, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Webb asked quietly. "Preparing in secret, building weapons, assuming the worst?" Sarah considered the question. 30 years ago we had a choice. Trust that any aliens we encountered would be benevolent, or prepare for the possibility that they wouldn't. We chose paranoia and preparation. And it saved us. "The Caraxians thought we were predictable," Webb mused. "They thought their algorithm could calculate everything. They never understood that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to adapt, to deceive, to do whatever it takes to survive." Sarah nodded. "They measured our ships and counted our weapons and calculated our defeat. But they never measured our determination. They never calculated our capacity for innovation under pressure. They never factored in that when humanity is threatened, we don't just fight, we evolve." In the depths of space, the wreckage of the Caraxian fleet drifted as a monument to the danger of underestimating an opponent. The grand algorithm, which had never been wrong in 50,000 years, had finally encountered a variable it couldn't process: human unpredictability. The galaxy had learned a new equation that day. It was simple, elegant, and absolute. Humanity plus threat equals evolution. And the answer was always survival. The end.